welcome back to Crazy Believe with Nelsa. And I am so excited about this conversation with my friend and who has totally inspired me in my own walk with this crazy faith that we have, Gabriella Chapman. Gabriella, welcome. My first
Welcome. Oh,
guest
good
after
morning.
100 years. I'm so excited.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I do want everybody to know that you are right now on site on your home in Wheels. I did sort of a little promo just to let them know this interview is taking place
Hmm.
with you having taken this huge leap of faith. And we might have anything happen during the recording, but we're just going to roll with it and see what happens. But I know it's going to be magical. So
Yeah.
tell us, Gabriella, a little bit about your background and how you even came to be living in an RV right now. Like
Well,
what
um,
transpired?
yeah. Well, I'll tell the very beginning because I think that all things with people when you like have big dreams, they always start with a seed, you know. And
Mhm.
so for me, that was when I was like 6 years old, and we were in Buffalo, New York, with my mom and my grandparents because my dad was in Turkey. He was in the Air Force, so was on one of the year TDYs. And his older sister, my Aunt Chandra, came to visit us from Fort Wayne, Indiana in an RV. And like she pulled up with her husband in this like house on wheels, you know, and like my sister and I were young, and my sister doesn't remember it, but I mean, that's to me very telling of just like how things can imprint on you because I remember it very vividly, going inside and just like the awe that I had of like, I never knew something like this existed, like a house that you can
Wow.
drive, like wherever you want to go. And so that was the seed. That was really something for me that just kind of stuck in like one day I want to do that too, right? And so things that you see
Mhm.
that you have a reference point for that you start to like build a dream around. And then fast forwarding to this last year, I was a homeowner. I had my house in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And uh, Albuquerque for me was a 20 plus year long, you know, seed that was also planted when I
Mhm.
had visited the first time, and I was like, I'm going to live here someday. Like it was in my spirit, like it spoke to me. And I also thought that that was like, you're going to live here, you're going to settle. This is going to be your home base and everything. And when I got there, that just wasn't the case. I think that that was more of a learning ground for me,
Mhm.
just lessons and growth, because there was a lot of that. But there was never this sense of real home and community and connection, right? Like
Mhm.
my house
Right.
in and of itself was a sanctuary, but I never really was able to root in. For me, relationships are really important. They're key to everyone, right? Like you
Mhm.
have to have
Mhm.
like your village, you know, and I never found that there. I found a lot of um, other stuff, you know, like, you know,
Yes.
that wasn't what I was looking for in terms of real authentic connections with people. And so I decided that I was ready to release that and go in search of um, something else, something more, you know. And I
Mhm.
decided to sell my house. In selling my house, it gave me the freedom to kind of lift anchor, and gave me a little bit of a nest egg that I could, you know, buy this RV. I still bought it
Mhm.
on a budget, like I do everything on a budget. um
Right.
and and you know, just started like, you know, fixing it and getting it together, and I had like some bumps in the roads to getting to it, but then eventually it was like go time, and I literally just jumped into it, you know, like there was the dream, the vision, the acquisition, and then it was like go, you know. So I
Mhm.
wasn't doing a lot of research and, you know, everything. I'm more of a like, I'll figure it out as I go, and you know, what comes with it will. So
Um, I guess what I would want to know as a listener, I know you personally, so it's not going to be the same as a listener. But if I were just a listener hearing this story, um, what in the world would have possessed you to sell your home? You know, everybody's all about. We grew up as Gen
yeah.
Xers. You get your home, you hold on to your home, you never let your home go. And you and I have both bought homes and sold homes at this point now.
Hmm.
What possessed you to sell your home? after all of that preaching that I'm sure your grandparents and parents probably did to you like mine did to me?
Well, I will say that my parents weren't homeowners until they were in their early 40s, you know, and
Wow. Hmm.
part of that was because my dad was in the Air Force, and so we were
Hmm.
always traveling, you know. I was born in Texas, my older sister was born in Panama, my younger sister was born in Spain, you know, and Colorado is
Wow.
where my parents eventually came to settle, and they bought a home, and my dad retired from the Air Force there. And so home ownership wasn't something that I really saw until it was later in my life. I was a little bit older, but
Hmm.
also it's not something that my parents impressed upon. You know, what they did impress upon is you're going to college, you know,
Okay.
you're going to
Yeah.
get your education so that you can take care of yourself, you know, whatever.
Right.
But the home ownership wasn't the thing. But just because of the nature of our society, right, we look around and there's a lot of things that we can say that, you know, you should be doing these things like grow up, find someone, get married, like, you know, get a home together, have children, you know, do all of this stuff, get a
Right.
good job, stay in that job forever, you know. And a lot of those things like have faded away just as like times have changed, but there are still some benchmarks that a lot of people think are, if I achieve these things, like I know I'm making it. Wouldn't say
Right.
necessarily that I had those things in my mind when I was buying my home. It was for practical reasons, you know. I wanted a space where no one was going to tell me, like, you know, you can't, you know, put your, which is another reason why, like, I don't like HOAs. That's a whole nother thing, you know, but it's like anyone telling me what I can or I cannot
Hmm.
do, you know. And in an apartment, I was, you know, I'm not like, you know, wasn't some party or whatever, but it's like if I want to paint my house this color, if I want to, you know, do my yard up like this, you know, I don't want someone, I don't want to have to ask permission. I don't want to have to deal with sharing a wall with someone who doesn't know how to go to bed on time, you know, or has like
Right.
rowdy parties all the time, or is just a disturbance to my peace. You know, I wanted to be able to the extent that I could, control my environment, you know, and owning my
Hmm.
own home was that. When I bought my house, it became so much more because it kind of like became my canvas, like for all of my beautiful creative ideas for how to like adorn it, like, you know, the paints that I chose, how I chose to decorate it, redoing my front door, landscaping my yard. um but when I decided to sell, it wasn't a thing of like, oh, like I'm giving up this, you know, big dream. It was like
Hmm.
I still have more to explore, you know. And that's the thing, because it's like what's more important to you, right? Like a status symbol
Right.
of having a house
Right.
and, you know, all this. And it's like, yes, with the house comes security, right? But like everything in our world, as we're seeing, really, it's like there is no real true 100% guarantee sense of security, right?
Mm.
It's like
Absolutely.
everything is fleeting, everything is up in the air, you know. Even right now with our current, you know, like political stuff going on, you know, this administration, everything is just kind of being stripped away, right? So it's like
Hmm.
and one of the conversations that we had the other day, it's like I'm learning to carry my home within me, you know.
Yes.
Um, and I think that I've always had a sense of that because I've always had a really strong sense of self, you know, of like what I want, and have always been very determined, you know. But I'm really learning, especially on this trip, because there's so much shifting. I always say that I'm very adaptable and I love change and everything like that.
Okay.
But this has been a lot of my kitty. This has been like
I was like,
a
"Whoop."
lot of change, you know, a lot of transition, like all the time, like on the go. And I think that the good majority of my life has prepared me for this type of
Mhm.
adaptability and flexibility. And I'm still having to get used to it. This is Gypsy right here.
Hello,
we share,
Gypsy.
we share this
She's looking
space.
so beautiful
We
on the walk here the other
I
day.
know we share all of this space. Um, but I would say, like, one, it's a personal decision. You have to know yourself. You have to know your comfort. And like, if you're going to decide to leap, then you have to just like roll with whatever comes with it, you know? And
Right.
I think that for most people, by the time they would get to a decision to do something like this, then they're in the mindset, or they already have that energy in their spirit of like, whatever comes comes, you know, and I'm going to deal with it
Right.
when it finds me, you know. um I don't think that someone would make a move unless like it was like something that was forced, like if they forcibly lost their house or, you know, something, and they found themselves in a situation. But I think even then, like, something comes up in you, right, around survival, you know, and
Mhm.
around learning how to thrive in a new circumstance, right? So you build those muscles, you know, as you're moving through it. So I think I kind of like went in a roundabout way, and I apologize. I have a tendency to
No,
do
it's
that, but
okay. Listen, that's what I enjoy about these conversations because I knew there was going to be more, like than the surface
Mhm.
questions that I probably prepped you for, and we may or may not get to those questions. But
Well,
um,
that's all good.
yeah,
I kind of like what I want to say about that too is like I appreciate having like a little bit of insight into like okay, like prepare your mind for this, but sometimes I really love even more the spontaneity of like conversation because sometimes things come out of me that I didn't know were sitting inside of me, right? Like messages
mm,
to myself or
right,
messages for other people, but like I
right,
love sometimes when you don't have time to process and like curate, you know, a response or whatever, because sometimes like what comes out, especially in trusted safe spaces, sometimes
yes.
things come up out of me and I have to pause and I'm like, that was good. You know, like
Ah,
I was holding that
I didn't
inside
know
of me.
that
I'm
was
like
in
so
there.
glad it, yeah, yeah. So I'm here for it.
Awesome. So, what I would like to ask, because you look very composed, you look very beautiful and radiant, like you've been just getting great summer sun. What has been the hardest part of this journey for you?
The hardest part of this journey has been uh sharing it with my pets.
Mm,
And who so I'm a big traveler. I've driven, you know, back and forth across the country, you know, in multiple directions like many times, but I always did it by myself, you know.
mm,
And I was always in a car, you know, and I would
mhm.
stop off. I, you know, have friends, you know, all over the place, right? Like you go to college, your friends move, and then you have
Right.
friends with houses or places where you can like come visit, come through, you know, and like that used to be
Yeah.
my journey when I would move across and when I was transitioning, um, having other entities along with you shifts it, and having pets in particular with their needs, and if you're attuned to their needs, right, if you're attuning
Mhm.
yourself to their energy and how they're feeling and whatnot, then um it makes it very difficult. And for example, like in this trip, I've already had to take Chubbs, my dog,
Mhm.
to the vet twice, and they were expensive visits, you know, for
Mhm.
things that, you know, we've encountered, you know, during this trip. And in the 4 years, you know, that I was living in my home, I took him to the vet twice, you know. So I've been on the road 3 months and he's
Yeah.
had to go, you know, twice. And I've had to manage that with finding, you know, finding someplace to take him, you know, having to go through like entry exams, pay extra costs for like new patient stuff, all of that. So the
Mhm.
expense, you know, the stress, the worry. And my cat, you know, before I got a handle on things, before I was like, it really brought my awareness to paying attention to her better, you know. She got
Mhm.
out 3 times, you know, and she was gone for hours, you know. And
Mm.
one of the times I was supposed to be leaving, you know, and I had to stay an extra night because she didn't come home until midnight, you know.
Wow.
Um,
How
so that
scary. Oh my
it
gosh.
is, you know, that aspect has been one thing that has been very difficult, but I've also been learning, you know, a lot about myself and just a lot about facilitating the experience for other living
Mhm.
creatures. You know, I'm really glad that I'm not doing with this with another person.
Mm.
Because I think that, you know, already like I feel the cramp, like I can't be as spontaneous. One, and it's not just the pets, but driving this big rig, you know, thankfully mine's only, it's a little shorty. She's only like just under 22 feet, right? So I can
Mhm.
park in normal parking spaces for the most part. And, you know, she
Mhm.
handles really well. But it's still like you're driving your entire house. So you can't just roll up in places and do a little parallel park and, you know,
Right.
get in there and have that, you know, you have to think about everything like, you know, 10 steps ahead, you know,
Right.
of what you're going to be doing. And for somebody who's very spontaneous, and I've stayed to my thing. Like, I still haven't been like, I'm going to plan out this next trip. I'm just like, I usually
Mhm.
just need
Mhm.
a destination and I roll, you know, and I've maintained that. But it does come with with its challenges because when you roll up on a space, you're not guaranteed really ever to find the exact comfort that you need exactly where you need to be. There have been a lot of repairs And everybody who's on the road will say that, like if they're in a van, if they're in an RV, if they're pulling a trailer, the repairs, and being on my own. But having had my house and owning it by myself, for the years that I did, all of the repairs, like that I had to deal with, with leaks, sewage stuff, like, my furnace, my swamp cooler, like all of that stuff, like I did that by
Right.
myself, right? So it's like that prepared me for this, just, and
Right.
always being handy in general.
Mhm.
But I would say but like now when I think about it, the biggest thing, Nelsa, has been um really what I'm confronted with myself, right? Like,
Mm.
because it's like how I'm showing up for every situation, every emergency, every, vet visit, every loss
Mhm.
of Gypsy jumping out of the thing, every repair that has to be made unexpectedly, every time that I've actually had to take it into a shop, which has been like 3 times, now since I've been on the road. I pay attention to myself. I pay attention to how I handle the stress. And sometimes I handle it well. And
Right.
sometimes I'm really kind of embarrassed to myself about like, you are not very graceful right now, like you're not. But then I also ask myself, like, why do I have to be graceful? Like, like what about, what in me is
Yeah.
saying that like I can't have a little bit of a breakdown, right now, because this shit is
Mhm.
hard.
Yes.
um
Exactly.
and like I think
Yeah.
so, there's everything going on, but like again, that could just be, chalked up to it's life, right? It just happens to be life inside of an RV and on the road instead of life in a house or an
Mhm.
apartment or whatever, but it's all life, right? It's everything
Right.
that would come at us. And maybe I'm experiencing a condensed, like,
Mhm.
version of that, and it's all happening like, more often, more frequently, because of my situation, but it's still just life. I think my challenge is constantly like taking a look at myself and asking myself, did I handle that well?
Mhm.
How can I handle it better next time? What did I like about how I showed up for myself? What did I not like about how I showed up, for myself and to, because I get frustrated with Chubs and Gypsy, and I have to remind
Mhm.
myself, like, you brought them along for this ride. You uprooted them, right? You need to like show some grace, with what's
Right.
going on. And so it's just constantly being under attack by my own psyche, you
Well, and
know?
it's not unlike being a mother. I mean, when I
Yes.
hear you say those things, I think about during my transition from my divorce with my children, how I had to buckle down to figure some stuff out. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, we do have those breakdowns. We are forced to admit how human we really are.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you feel like you've been a superpower in situations, but then when you have to go to the extreme of, I'm really not handling this well, I'm really
Yeah.
not doing well. I
I'm
really
struggling.
thought I'm struggling, girl. That life be life, and that's just what I want to say.
Yes.
Life be life, and it's just like you. Then, if you don't have the real support system at that time, to people who can really understand what you're going through because they haven't really had those same struggles,
Yeah.
then even your family is not necessarily helpful all the time in certain ways
Yeah.
because they don't really fully comprehend this particular struggle. Not that they haven't
Yeah.
struggled, but this particular
Yes.
one is very,
Yeah.
it's yours to figure out. So
Yeah.
I totally can hear that and I can feel that and empathize with it in my own way. I haven't lived in an RV, but I'm a flight attendant now in my real
Yeah.
life, and so living in my aunt's basement as
Mm-hmm.
my crash pad has given me limited space
Yeah.
for all the things that I own that I loved, having to let
Mm-hmm.
go of those things. And that was
Yes.
the other part of what I thought about for you as you were, both excited, and it was a bittersweet transition, I know, because you
Yeah.
had really curated your home. And I didn't go there, but I've been watching you on the media, social media, and we'd had, conversations on FaceTime, and just knowing like the things that you had put into that house and the energy you had put into that home, and then to have to feel like you're the, do I wander or do I go? I mean, that is really your psyche at work, the thing that was the
Yeah.
seed planted that I know this is something I'm supposed to do on my list of things, but why
Yeah.
now after I finally get this house in some kind of
Yeah.
order now. And it always seems to
Yeah,
happen like that. It never seems to happen like at the right time. It always seems
yeah,
to happen at a time when it's like, I'm just now getting my bearings, like, not
yes,
yet.
yes, yeah, yeah.
So
And you're so right. I still love that house. Like, I love that house so much that I like, I kind of like became acquainted with the new owner, just one, because the handoff to me, I wasn't just handing it
it's
off like, here's a
sacred.
piece of property,
Yeah.
it was like, I need you to love this house,
Hmm.
the way I loved this house,
Yes.
like,
I
and
felt
I
the
and I
same way.
need, yeah, like I need this home to still feel the love and the caretaking and like the energy that I was putting into it. You're going to do it different,
Mhm.
but I need that to still exist, like
Yeah.
you know, I didn't want to hand it over to someone who was like, I'm going to tear the whole thing down and like do this, like I needed to know that who was buying my house, like, was felt that it was as magical, and as
Yeah.
sacred as I did. And some people are like, it's a house, it's property, but like, that's how you do your life. That's
Right. Not
that's
how
how you
we
do
do
that.
ours.
This is how I operate. And
Yeah.
thankfully, it did go to another single woman, who, she had her dogs, and it was very interesting. One of the things that I love most, that really for me was like confirmation that, like, the house universe, found the right person,
Yeah.
was with Chubbs. I had like about a half an acre, beautiful piece of land that I was always working. There literally was not a day, or a week, I can say, that went by that I wasn't doing some project on that house. I was
Mhm.
always working on the house, but it also brought me joy. It was like meditation for me as well, But I had like the front yard and side yards, a little backyard that was fenced in, and then there was the backyard, as I called it, which is where a good majority of the acreage was, And I always wanted to. I was like, what do I want to do with that? And at first, when I first moved there, I was like, I want to turn it into like this sanctuary space, and do workshops and like invite people and blah blah blah, this, that, and the other. And I was like, maybe that's later, but then I thought to myself, like, I'd like to build an agility course for Chubbs, because
Mhm.
he's very smart. He's an Australian Shepherd Blue Heeler, but he has a lot of energy, And I thought to myself, I want to build him a course out there, because I've always loved, again, seeds that were planted when you were younger. The old movie, The Flight of the Navigator, I remember watching it when I was a kid. And in the first scene, it opens up and they're at this large park, and there's a bunch of dogs. They were border collies, I believe, or Australian Shepherds. And they were doing agility stuff like catching frisbees. And like
Mhm.
this kid, the one, his dog had like a little bandana. He was a little black and white, split down the middle dog. And I was like, and I saw this and I was like, I want to train a dog like that someday, right? So fast forward, I'm like, Chubbs got energy. Chubbs is smart. Like, I love watching like the dog competitions when they're walking on the seesaws and everything. I'm going to build him one. And so I started collecting, bit by bit, like scrap material and things that I was going to build it with. But of course, with everything going on, I never got to
Mhm.
it. Well, this woman, when she wrote me a letter prior to moving in, she talked about how she has these dogs and she trains them, for
Wow.
competition and for agility sports. And when we had an opportunity to meet face to face, she told me that it was her intention to build an agility course in that backyard area. And like, for me,
Wow.
I was like, thank you. Like, and it gave me a sense of peace,
Yes.
because the transition was a little rough,
Hmm.
and I was, tugging at that, and I did pour my entire self into that house, Nelsa. And when I tell you that, I think part of this journey is also allowing myself to recharge and heal and regenerate, because so much of myself was put into that home, on every level that you can imagine,
Hmm.
that I'm kind of depleted,
Yeah.
right now,
Yeah.
like, for inspiration, for creativity, for energy to do other things. And, part of this journey is just to give myself time, and it wasn't just the house, living in Albuquerque, the the experiences that I encountered with fake people,
Yeah.
while I was there. That was a big thing too. I made just a small handful of genuine friends, but I had more encounters um, with people that just didn't have good intentions, didn't, like,
Hmm.
this just weren't living right, and I was, in those situations and just having to really decipher like people who wear masks versus people who are
Mm-hmm.
genuine, right? And
Right.
um lessons in that is like learning to trust myself the first time,
Mm.
when I tell myself something, when I feel something, but like
Right.
what's in front of you like appears, to be like so genuine or whatever, like the body knows, and the body
Mm-hmm.
talks to you. And I
Right.
think so, like, that's one of my huge lessons is that, like, learning to act on what I'm communicating to myself sooner rather than having to go through the whole lesson,
Mm-hmm.
and experience the heartache, and betrayal of things, and I'm not talking about like, like purely like romantic relationships. I'm talking about
Exactly.
people that you
Right.
deal with every day, that
Work. Yeah.
yeah,
All that.
yeah, and so this is kind of like a healing thing, and like I do need to um I don't want to like call my energy back in from, what I poured into the house, but I need to build new energy, right? Like I
Mm.
need to recharge with new energy for like this next chapter for myself. And I don't really usually things start to catch traction for me
Mm-hmm.
when I have like a plan, right? And an
Mm-hmm.
idea in my head of a direction that I want to go in,
Right.
and I don't right now. So it's just kind of like a meandering, it's not aimless,
Yeah. Well, and then
but it's
sometimes I
just
think
a
you gotta rest. You've got to rest
yeah,
to be able to
yes,
formulate a plan. And so many people
yes,
don't.
yeah,
And I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to talk about that for a little
no,
bit though. Like
yeah,
you've been posting content where you are in nature. Like you are really
hmm
100% living in nature, and
yeah,
you've got these beautiful fires in the morning and the evenings, like you're putting your feet, talking about going to visit the redwoods.
hmm
What does that feel like in contrast to the person who was living in her own home, who was working in a business, who was, that you are like you're working in nature, you're living in nature, you're experiencing nature in a almost immersion
hmm
concept right now. And what is
yeah.
that doing for your reset,
So I will say that it's actually not too different from what my life was, because you remember when I used to post when I was in my house, I started
Right.
my mornings where? On the porch,
Outside on the
outside,
porch. Yep.
staring over the bosque, watching the sun come up. I would be on the side of my house outside, shoes off in the grass or in the dirt because it was hard for me to as
Your
but like
grass, right?
with my little chimenea, having a fire
Right.
out on my back patio, outside early morning, having a
Yeah.
fire, in the evening, having a fire. And so the common thread for me, and I think that, I wasn't doing enough of it on the early part of this trip, I will say, because
Mm-hmm.
I've been able to find some stillness these last like this last month and a half. In I guess it was like May, or in May, I was in just outside of Santa Cruz in Scotts Valley. My sister had arranged with one of her friends for me to park on her ranch. So I
Mm-hmm.
was there with horses, and Chubbs and Gypsy were both able to run free, and I was able to work
Mm-hmm.
the land, the same way that I worked the land at my own house, and like put
Mm-hmm.
my hands back in the dirt and be, immersed in nature. And that started reminding me like where I get my recharge from. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
I've always been an outside, like walking, meandering, observing, like sitting in nature type of person.
Mm-hmm.
But I had also moved away from it because being in this RV and traveling, all the time, like it had I had gotten into that routine of like go,
Mm-hmm.
go, pack up, go, And
Yeah.
then when I got, there at the ranch, and then when I got up here, I think like probably around like, I don't know, it was maybe about like just not too far ago, because even up here I was like still like, do these duties. Like I was doing all of the um obligatory, like get your day
Mm-hmm.
started, take care of Chubs, take him on a walk, do this, because it's like you have to have some sort of regimen and ritual, you know, to
Mm-hmm.
like keep your life going and to like pay attention to everything. But one of the days I just was like, I'm just gonna rest, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna sit back and absorb this. And like I had done maybe one or two fires. I love fire, you know.
Yeah.
It for me it's a very like transformative, transmuting energy, you know, like, and I
Yeah.
really do, I draw a lot from being around a fire, and I also pour things and release things into the fire, sometimes physically,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes just mentally, you know,
Yeah.
spiritually, you know. But being able to walk these trails, like yesterday I walked the, you know, the entirety of the Redwood Trail yesterday. And, you know, it was one of those things that I had to think to myself, like, I'm literally at the trailhead. This is where my host spot is, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
I stare at that. And I took Gypsy on a part of that trail the other day, and it was my first time entering in. Like, I've guided, you know, campers down that trail and everything, but it was my first
Mm-hmm.
time going. And just in the first several yards, I was like, why have I waited this long, you know, to come into this space and experience this, you know? And it's really because I was so caught up with what like my duties were supposed to be, and like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, being present, like still in that thing, that I wasn't accessing it for myself. But yesterday I walked in and I went all the way to the end of the trail, stopped a few times to put my feet in the water. I walked back barefoot, you know. My friend Coral reminded me about earthing, you know. And
Yes.
like, you know, over the years, like, you know, it's, you know, it had its trendy heyday, whatever, but really all it is like get your bare feet out there on the ground, on the earth,
Mm-hmm.
connect to the earth, and like have that exchange of energy, you know.
Yes.
Because we're always walking around in these rubber soled shoes and like, you
Right.
know, like all of this stuff, and we aren't connecting with nature. And it's a power source, it's an energy source, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so just the act of doing that, like slowing down, sitting by the fire, nurturing a fire, you know, like getting it to go, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you got to like coax it because it's like I'm not ready, you know, and you're like come on, you
Right.
know. But the power of presence, you know, and just being in what you're doing. Nature is so restorative, and it is it's restoring me, but not just like energetically. It brings focus for me, it gives me
Mm-hmm.
ideas, it makes me start dreaming about things, you know, when I just sit. um because it's like all of the energy that is always about doing just
Yes.
starts being about being, right? And
Mm-hmm.
when you're being, then you have an opportunity to like your heart's open, you know,
Yeah.
like, and your heart gets into that like dreamy, like wandering, you know, like I wonder what it would be like to do this, or like you start thinking like maybe
Right.
I should, you know. And that's like those are the seeds of all the beginnings, right? Like for me, like they
Right.
always start with a curiosity, they always start with a like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like thinking I could, like, you know. And then it sounds like crazy, and that's what I love about your crazy believe, right? Because you know, I think that was one of the things that you had asked me is like, what does crazy believe
Yeah.
to you? And you know,
Yeah.
I hope it's not
It's a
jumping, but
great
like
segue.
that's,
Thank you for jumping right in.
yeah, that's what crazy believe is for me. Like I have an idea and it seems really wild, you know, but it
Right.
also seems really possible, you know?
Yeah.
And so I just say to myself, like, why not? You know, like, why not? And I think that like the more you lean into like crazy believe, the more you lean in to things that feel impossible, that might have people looking at you sideways, because you have the benefit of knowing like, well, it worked last time, you know. It was
Right.
bumpy, but it worked, you know.
Right.
So it means therefore it could likely work again this time, you know. And we won't know unless we test the theory, you know. And
That
so,
part.
you know, and like it's just like I think that the more you take risks, the more those risks work out in your favor, even if they don't work out to the tune of like the exact path that you thought it was going to
Right.
be, right? But it still works out. Like it might have given you a different outcome,
Mm-hmm.
might have presented you with a different gift, but it still worked out, right? Then you start looking at other things and you start thinking like, well, shit, like
Why not?
that worked. Why not,
Right.
you know? And
Yes.
I think that that's such a beautiful energy to have, because I think that there are so many people that like they get stuck in the like, well, what if it doesn't work? Right?
Right. Right.
And
And they never try.
I they
Yeah.
never
You
try,
talk
you
yourself
know?
out of
And
it. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like I don't think that I've ever lived in that energy. I think I've entertained that energy before, but I
Mm-hmm.
always choose why not, you know?
Right.
And I think that, you know, one of the other things that is a motivator for me, Abraham Hicks,
Mm-hmm.
I used to listen more often, you know, I've kind of shifted in, you know, my own growth and whatever, but,
Mm-hmm.
you know, definitely, a lot of powerful, transformative, energy there. And one of the things, you know, that was shared there is like, when you're thinking about something that you want to do, you want to like keep your energy, you know, at the highest level, like frequency level,
Yes.
right? And if you
Yes.
think about the why, right, the why of like, why do I want to do this, like, why do I want to travel in an RV and like uproot my life and this, that, and the other, and you start thinking about like the adventure, all of the things I could see, I could finally visit all my
Yes.
friends, you know, that I missed, that I haven't been able to like leave because I was so anchored to my house. Like I can
Mm-hmm.
like take Chubbs to the beach, I don't think he's ever seen the ocean, you know, like all of these things,
Oh,
like the why, the why, the why, right? What's
yeah.
driving? When you start thinking about the how, right? The how brings that energy down, because the how
Yes.
is like heavy with like, how am I going to pay for the RV? How am I going to get my house
Mm-hmm.
sold? How am I going to, you know, get all this ready? How am I going to afford this? Like, how am I going to stay safe? How am I going to keep the, you know, like the how
Mm-hmm.
is the weeds. It takes you into
The,
the weeds, right?
the the pins and the
Yes,
balloon is what I like to
the
think
balloons
about.
pop,
Yeah.
pop, 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 exactly.
Yeah.
And so whenever I'm conjuring some new like wild crazy scheme in my head, I focus on like, why do I want to do this, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why, what about this feels like a good idea to me, you know, like, you know, what is making me smile about this, like why, you know?
Yeah.
And I focus there, because when I start getting into the how's going to figure itself out regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're going to be met with the how from day one. As soon as you start, you know, you're going to start
Yes.
seeing the how surface, and you're going to start
Right.
seeing yourself taking care of the how in the moment,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
you always do.
But the
And
leads will
so
come. Yeah.
yes. Yeah. And also, it's like you don't even know. Sometimes, like, resources show up to help you solve that how that you couldn't
Mm-hmm.
even have fathomed when you were like thinking, when you were worrying about the how, you know? So it's just like leave it until you need to address it, because, you know, 9 times out of 10,
Absolutely.
for me, the resources have either come from here, you know, they've come from here, or they've come from some like outside source that I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
damn, just in the nick of time. Like, thank you, you
Just in the
know?
nick every time.
Yeah,
Every
you know,
time.
and then you
Yeah.
just keep on rolling on your way, you know? And
Yeah.
I think that's like a big thing. I think that that is something that comes from that crazy believe energy, you know? That's what it's fueled by for me, you know,
Yeah.
and how I move, because I know a lot of folks like, you know, I have good friends and I have, you know, watchers, right?
Yes.
Who you know, who could be looking at me and they're like, I could never, right? Or, you know,
Yes.
others judging like how you're doing it and whatnot, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, whatever. It's like, you know, my life, I'm here to live my life for me. I've told my
Mm-hmm.
mom, you know, and my dad, I remember the first time I said it to them, first time I said it to my mom, I was like, I'm not here to live my life for you. And I love you and
Mm-hmm.
all due respect, but like you didn't bring me into this world to live out a life. I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's my life to live, you know? Like
Right.
it's my experience, my journey, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think I wish more people could understand that, and understand that there's no like disrespect to people who, you know, you're, you know,
Right.
who
Have helped
brought
you
you
along
through
the
or
way.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
No disrespect, but like understanding that like you get this one life, right? Unless I
Yeah.
do believe in like souls coming through again, but this is the one life right now.
This
right?
specific one. Yeah,
This one
exactly.
right now. And we all have a limited amount of time. And the crazy thing is we don't know how much time we actually have. Because for some
Absolutely.
people, the time is this. For some people, it's this. And for some
Right.
people, it's this, right? And then it's done, you know?
Yeah.
And for me, I have always had like this insatiable hunger to see and experience and do as much as I can, with this
Mhm.
little body, with
Right.
my heart, with my mind,
Yes.
and with my adventuring soul, and
Yes.
I mean, I've left relationships for it, I've left jobs,
Right.
I've left towns, I've left, cities, all in search of like the next thing. And it's not a lost search. It is like, I want to know more. I want to like
Discovery.
I want to know what that's
Discovery.
like. I want to
Hmm.
live this life for a little while, and see what that feels like, And
Yeah.
every time I do that, I learn a little bit more about myself,
Yeah.
I learn a lot more about myself,
Yeah.
and I feel like the lessons keep getting the experiences and the lessons keep getting bigger because I keep doing like bigger stakes, you know,
I
like
know, right?
and
Look, the
and
cliff
so I'm
gets
finding,
higher.
yes, yeah, and it's like I find more about my capacity,
Yeah.
to meet myself, at the edge, like we were
Yes.
talking about,
Hmm.
and to like lean in. And I also learn more about my fears,
Yeah.
what's still in the way of me living bigger,
Hmm. Whew,
and
that's a word.
you know yeah, and
Hmm.
so it's like I get the good and I get the informative. There's no bad really for me,
Right. It's
like
information, all
I
of
get
it.
that, yeah, I get that
Hmm.
confirmation, and then I also get like the magnifying glass for like, you need to look at this, you know,
Yeah.
spend some time with that, explore that, like what's going on there for you with that, right? And how is this, being
Hmm.
in your way, right? Like how are
Yeah.
you being in your own way? And so I've had a lot of that as well. It's emotional.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think the fact that I like the term lean in that you've used there, like so many people refuse to lean in to the grief, lean into the
Yeah.
disappointment, lean into the joy, lean into the adventure. Like
Mm-hmm.
we have a whole plethora of things as humans that we get to feel and experience, but we rush
Yeah.
through so many experiences. And I've been guilty of this. Like when I was on the mountaintop, I would be rushing through to get to what's next. When I was in the valley,
Mm-hmm.
I was not taking in the lesson of like, why am I here? Like, what is this teaching me?
Trying to get
So
out.
I'm trying to get
Yeah.
out. Yes. So I
Yeah.
keep going round and round and round the mountain. But one of the things that I really want to emphasize that you've said here today, for those people who are in our lane, first and foremost, because sometimes I feel like I was such an anomaly. I'm not going to say a weirdo,
Yeah.
but an anomaly where
Yeah. I
I
feel you.
always had that desire to meet new people, to go to new places, to try new things. And a lot of the people that were around me in seasons were not those people. And so it
Yeah.
always felt like I was the odd duck out. And it's like, is anybody else in the world understanding this feeling? And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it was this feeling of like I needed to be free to
Yeah.
roam and to fly. I think that's what I really love about being a flight attendant at this season of my life. Like I'm always going somewhere different. I'm always meeting new people. Even at the airport, there's like a whole
Yep.
shift of things happening at the same time and then nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then here we go again.
Yes.
But it did feed that need. And so, I wanted to be a responsible mother, a responsible wife, a responsible adult. But there were a lot of things about the role as people expected it to be played that just did
Mm-hmm.
not fit the way I've been made. And so
Yes.
I think sometimes I do struggle with the feelings of, you know, did I do it right? Did I,
Mm-hmm.
was following my destiny the right thing to do? Did I do it at the right time? And I think a lot of people who are like us probably do grapple with that a lot. But I love how you say, like just stay focused on the why, the how
Mm-hmm.
will work itself out, because eventually, I think for me, as my children get older and they are already about, mom, I got to live my life. Like, I'm not trying to
Mm-hmm.
hold them to any expectation other than to be true to yourself.
Yeah.
And, in our house, make sure you keep God at the forefront, because,
Mm-hmm.
however you choose to call God, spirit, sometimes we have some arguments about that. God's got many names in
Yes.
my life. So, be true to you though. Like, don't
Mm-hmm.
try to buckle yourself up in some sort of box and put yourself in some sort of um, mangled position trying to live a life for somebody else that doesn't match what God has created
Yeah.
for you. So that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
things I really admire about you. And I wanted to say that live and on air. And the other thing is, for people who maybe have put themselves in the box and now they can't breathe, like,
Mm-hmm.
figure out what it is that is going to bring joy back into your life, and listen to the why of it. Like, I think
Yeah.
you have spoken to this so beautifully today, like with the adventure. But everybody's adventure is not moving into an RV or becoming a flight attendant or any of that, what the two of us have done. But there's got to be something that is on that list that you thought, and I like how you said these things happen as seeds when you were young. Same thing for
Mm-hmm.
me. I had
Mm-hmm.
seeds placed as a young child that, oh, I want to do this, this, this. And I pretty much checked off a lot of those things on that list. So I would say to somebody, look at what was on your list as what I want to do when I grow up. But go back
Yeah.
to that part of your childhood, if you can remember it, and pull some of that stuff out and look at it again
Yeah.
with new, fresh eyes. But I would like for you to end today with advice for anybody who is at that precipice, maybe where, they get the opportunity to either go back in the box or they can jump and crazy believe. What would be your advice?
Um, well, I would say that everything begins with having courage, right?
Mm.
And it's having courage on multiple levels. So first, you have to have the courage to be honest with yourself, right? To say that where you are right now, you've outgrown that, because I don't believe that there's ever a wrong place that somebody has chosen to be, right? And or sometimes people are in a space, right, that they I'll just say have
Outgrown is
yeah
a good word. Hmm.
have courage to admit that you've outgrown the place and that you want more, right? Like, don't be afraid to ask more. Like, you have to have courage to be honest with yourself around that. And then you have to have courage to break out of this life that you've built for yourself, that and right now, like, even people who don't have social media or whatever, like, there's always people always worry about what are they going to think, what are they going to say. Now, I'm lucky in the fact that, like, I didn't have like a husband or children. I have a partner right now, he's been supporting me amazingly on this journey, right? Like, but I didn't have children that I had to consider. I didn't have a husband, that I had to ask, like, could this work for us? Or like, what do you think about, like,
Right.
I am an anomaly in and of myself, with, that, like,
Hmm.
never been married, no kids. Like, I've always chosen myself, and I've had
Mm.
the luxury of being able to do that, right? Um, but everything about shifting and changing your patterns or inviting something new into your life just begins with courage. And like I said, the courage to be honest, with yourself around like where you are and the fact that you've outgrown it and it's no longer bringing you the joy and satisfaction that it did before. The courage, to step out into something new, even if it's not built yet, like if it's not something that you're
Right.
stepping into that's already formed, if you've got to be the builder, right? You have to have the courage, to take that on and to do that. You have to have the courage to disappoint people,
Mm-hmm.
because
Big one.
so many people have expectations on your life, and you would be surprised how many people have built a certain part of their life around your life staying static the way that it is, and not in a bad
Mm-hmm.
way, but just like it's something they can depend on, like this is
Right.
how it's been, this is how, so like that's part of their security system for some
Right.
people, right? So you have to have the courage to be prepared to disappoint some folks that might have been, you know, depending on you for part of their stuff, you know, that now that they're going to receive back and they have to own and they have to figure out what to do with it, but that's them, right?
Right.
And I think that you know, you just have to have the courage to make the first step. When I was getting ready to sell my house, I found a an entry in my journal that was like a year ago, like a year prior.
Mm-hmm.
This was in September of 2024, and I found, you know, a note. It could have been through a text thread actually with a friend that I was saying like, I'm getting ready to, like, you know, find the courage to sell my house and uproot from Albuquerque. That was a year ago to the day. I found it on the same day, September 6th, 2024.
Wow.
I came across that message again, right? And so there I was, and I had just actually met with a realtor like 2 days prior to that. But
Mm-hmm.
leading up to that, you know, um, I talked about it a lot. And then one day I was like, Gabriella, you just meet with a realtor, have them come look at your
Mm-hmm.
house and find out what you need to do. You have to begin because you're talking about it, but you're not moving on it, right? And so that was the first
Mm-hmm.
step. And then once you take that first step, it starts to dispel some of the fear and things like that that you have around, or it just makes something that felt like this big, like it shrinks it a little bit more so that
Yeah.
it starts to feel like it's attainable, right? And that you can do
Mm-hmm.
it, you know? I think a lot of times some people have an idea and they never even like explore the possibility of it, right? So it always feels grandiose, it always feels out of reach, it always feels like
Mm-hmm.
I can't, right? And it's just like do one thing and movement towards that thing and find out, like just see, because I guarantee
Right.
that one thing, that one step that you take is going to make the other steps that need to come after it feel a lot more attainable, right? But it's always the first step
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, feels so big, you know. And so really it's just about, it's trusting yourself, it's having courage and trusting yourself, trusting that you like have everything that you need within you,
Mm-hmm.
or everything that you need will find you and it will meet you along the path once you begin, you know. And so it's like those two things. And then just grace, um just having grace for yourself and like allowing, you know, all the things, you know, to meet you. And you know, not being so hard on yourself, which I'm still, that's my whole life, you know, like I'm always like, I can
That's
do
the
it better,
lesson
I
you
can do
came
it
here
this, I can
for.
do it that, you know. But I'm really learning like how to have more grace for myself, in my imperfections, in my, you know, flawed approaches, in my wild approaches to things, you know, in my, you know,
Yeah.
monkey mind that like gets going. But to allow myself grace to like let it come in and be like, oh, that's just who I am. Like it's
Right.
just how I roll, you know.
We're
And
not
like keep
always
moving.
nice.
No. And we don't have to be, you know.
Right.
That has been like one of the biggest things, like in, you know, really like in this last year, because I've had to say goodbye to some acquaintances. I won't even call them
Mm-hmm.
friends. Acquaintances that I had that I had mislabeled as friends, you know. And I had to say goodbye to those, you know. And I wasn't nice and it wasn't pretty, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't care, you know, because like as a
Said it
person
with your
who,
chest, right? You said it with your
as
chest.
someone who is said it with my chest, you know, it's just like, and I like that version of myself, you know, because it's a
Mm-hmm.
version of Gabriella that stands on business for herself, you know, and isn't deferring to like, well, how can I make this more palatable? How can I make this easier for that person? How can I like do the least amount of damage to their feelings, you know? Meanwhile, I'm carrying scars and bruises, you know, from how they're interacting with me, you know, and even even, you know, life in general, you know, like I've just gotten more, you know. And it's just like, you don't like it, that's not my problem. Like I people do stuff to me all the time that I have to work through myself, within myself,
Mm-hmm.
to overcome, right? To like
Right.
wake up the next day and feel like I can like keep going, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in control of that, you know, and I take
Right.
responsibility for my feelings. So you take responsibility for yourself. I'm going to tell
Right.
you my truth. You know, I'm going to show up in this way. Sometimes I'll do it with grace. Sometimes I'll do it, you know, whatever. And sometimes I won't, you know, because I've gotten to
Yeah.
that point where it's like, I'm out of grace for you right now. You know, I'm
Right.
out of grace for this experience right now. And this is just it. Do with it what
Right.
you will, but I'm done, you know? And it's just like, I love that. Like, I love because I was raised as like a good girl, you know,
Yeah.
like, and like my mom taught us all the etiquette, you know, all of the politeness, all of this. And my mom was still
Hmm.
fierce though, because I saw my mom get up in some people's faces, you know, which is also why I know like it's in me, you know,
Yes.
like, but
Right.
for the most part, you know, my mother was very much about like managing perception, you know,
Hmm.
and I'm not trying to manage anyone's perception of me anymore. You know,
Right. It's a
I
lot of
am
work. Takes
living.
up a lot of
Yeah,
energy. Yeah.
a lot of too much energy, you know, and I need
Too
the energy
much.
for all this, you know. I need the energy for what I'm building, you know, for my next, you know, the next pages in this chapter, the next chapter after this. I
Hmm.
need all my energy. I don't have energy to do emotional labor for other people, you know.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, that's a word.
you can figure out your stuff the same way I'm figuring out for me, you know. And if
Yeah.
you need some extra help, that's why there's therapists, that's why there's your best friend, that's why there's your granny, your mommy, your
Right.
this,
There's
or
YouTube.
that's why they're sitting still, you know, and listening to
Yeah.
what you need to hear from yourself. You know, more people need to do that. I'm recently getting back into my meditation process, you know,
Hmm.
and like sitting with myself. I used to do it so much more, you know, but like finding quiet, like taking meditation walks, sitting in stillness, you know, sitting by the fire, but allowing
Hmm.
yourself to be heard, you know, and more
Yes.
people need to do more of that instead of like talking out at other people and projecting, you know, and trying to get reactions and rises out of people so that they can deflect from what their
Hmm.
body and spirit is trying to help them feel, you know. That's a whole nother thing. I know we ain't
That's a
talking
whole
about
nother
that, but
episode, but this was a great one, and I want to thank you again for spending time with me. I know the babies have been looking like, Mama, where what are we doing? Why are we still in this RV? And we've been waiting for you. So, best of luck on your journey. How can people
thank
follow
you.
you? I know you've got social media
Well,
out there. What would you like to share as far as following you and seeing how your journey unfolds?
yeah, I mean, if folks are curious at like some of the stuff that you were talking about, like I created an Instagram page, My Little House on Wheels, you know,
Hmm.
and that I've been trying to keep up, you know, with, you know, posts of just little experiences. It's nothing flashy. It's just really just somebody
Right.
living their life, you know.
Well, for those who are
But a lot
curious,
of,
though, yeah.
yeah, yeah, a lot of beauty on there for sure, like of just, you know, what I like the highlights of what I've been experiencing. So yeah, that's it. My Little House on Wheels on Instagram is like
Awesome.
my main thing. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sitting down with me and even like engaging me because like I said, like stuff has come up for me too and it always gets me thinking
Yes.
about things differently, you know, like it just gives me a little zine, you know, on things for me to
Yeah.
come back around to.
Well, it was
So,
confirmation for me. Our last conversation, our chat with coffee in the morning, and I was just like, okay, it's time. And she's the one who's going to help me relaunch because again, this is exactly what Crazy Believe was about. That you're going to
mhm.
take a leap of faith on something that has been put in your spirit, and there's no
Yeah.
turning back.
Yeah.
There's always a next step and the next step and the next thing, but there's no turning back really to the person that you were who shrinks back. And
Because
so
why
this
would
was like
you?
a rededication of no
Yeah.
shrinking back.
Yeah, no shrinking back. Like, why would we go
Yeah.
backwards, you know? And
Yeah.
congratulations to you because, like, it does take, I think that, like, people see folks doing stuff and they think that it's easy, right? Or it looks easy. Or sometimes the people make it look easy, right?
Hmm.
But one, life isn't easy. Everyone knows that, right? Because we're all living it. But also, like, dreaming, manifesting, walking the walk, you know, like, none of it is easy. But there's joy in it. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
times what people see is the joy and they confuse that with ease, right? But it's actually
Yes.
just the byproduct, you know, it's the bonus,
Hmm.
you know? And that's why people are glowing and lit up and everything like that, but it doesn't mean like that there's also not hardship that is like produce that glow, that
Hmm.
smile, that energy, right? But you take it as just part of the journey and you're just like,
Yeah.
it's just what comes along with it, right? So congratulations on,
Thank
relaunching.
you.
I love your conversations. I love your energy. I love Crazy Believe, like it's a
Thank
beautiful energy.
you.
Yeah. And thanks for
Thank
sharing it with
you.
me and inviting me into it with you.
Well, I love you. Be safe out there, and we will be
I
following you
will.
to see what else happens. But I do want you to come back
I
before the
will. I'd love
adventure
to.
is over, so
Of
we can see
course.
where in the world is Gabriella next. So
Yes. I would love to. Yes.
have
Thank
a
you.
great rest of
Absolutely.
your day, my friend, and don't
You
stop
too.
crazy believing.
I won't. Bye, Nelsa.
Bye.